Good evening or good morning, wherever you are in the world. I'm Tan Xiao Chin, and I'm moderating the fourth YouTube session of the 8th International Women's Day edition of our Read for Pixels campaign. Through Read for Pixels, the Pixel Project is collaborating with 14 award-winning best-selling authors to raise awareness about violence against women and to raise funds for the Pixel Project to keep our efforts to end violence against women alive and kicking. We'll be telling you more about the Read for Pixels fundraiser, which has lots and lots of exclusive author goodies a little later in the session. You can find out more about the Pixel Project by visiting www.thepixelproject.net. Now, today we have a very special guest for our live Read for Pixels discussion and Q&A session, the lovely mystery author Sujata Massey. Oops, and wait, let me put myself back on too. All right. So, welcome to Read for Pixels, Sujata.
Thanks. I'm so happy to be here.
Lovely. I mean, also for you guys, you should know that although Sujata was born in England to parents from India and Germany, she was raised primarily in the United States. And before she became an internationally best-selling mystery and historical fiction writer, she was a feature writer for the Baltimore Sun evening newspaper, followed by 2 years as an English teacher in Japan, which informed much of her first mystery series featuring Japanese-American amateur investigator Rei Shimura. Sujata's mystery fiction has won the Agatha, McAvity, Mary Higgins Clark, and Bruce M. Alexander Awards and is published in 20 countries. And aside from spending time with us here today, Sujata has also generously donated a couple of super exclusive goodies to the stash of author goodies we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page. Now, goodie number 1 is the next PERVEEN Mystery ARC, signed and personalized. Sujata is offering one signed and personalized copy of the ARC, Advanced Reading Copy, of her upcoming book when it becomes available to one donor anywhere in the world. If you are a fan of her PERVEEN mystery books, this is your chance to read the story before anyone else does while supporting the cause to end violence against women. Do be warned though that you will have to wait for several months after you donate to get this goodie, as the book is currently in the editing phase and is actually yet to be even officially announced. So you heard it here first. So as of now, the ARC is slated to be ready by the end of this year. However, the exact mailing date cannot be guaranteed. But the Pixel Project and Sujata will do our best to get into your hands as soon as possible. Now, goodie number 2 is Sujata Massey's PERVEEN Mystery Book and Character Note Bundle. This very special bundle is all ready to go to one generous Read for Pixels donor situated in the US or Canada. It consists of, as you have seen, one signed and personalized first edition hardcover of The Widows of Malabar Hill, one signed and personalized first edition hardcover of The Satapur Moonstone, one signed and personalized first edition cover of The Bombay Prince, and one handwritten note from either PERVEEN Mystery herself or another character in the series of the donor's choice. Now, all 3 books have either won or are in the running for major crime mystery awards. The Widows of Malabar Hill in particular has not only won 4 such awards, but is also a rare first edition of the book. And just so you know, this is the very first time Sujata is giving away a complete signed and personalized hardcover set of all 3 books. As of now, we have raised $1,487 towards our $5,000 goal. So please help us keep the momentum going and give generously before the fundraiser ends on April 15. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. And if you're watching this session live on YouTube, you will have the opportunity to ask Sujata any burning questions you might have. Just make sure you're logged into your YouTube account so that you can type your questions into the chat box to the right of the YouTube screen. And Juliana, who is today's producer and chat box moderator, will relay them to me to read out to Sujata to answer. And now, over to Sujata. What will you be reading for us today?
I'm going to read you part of a scene from my most recent book, The Bombay Prince. And this is a mystery where my heroine, who's Bombay's first woman lawyer, has just been at a big event. The Prince of Wales has come to visit India, and there has been some violence breaking out. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that real life experience was like for my character.
Lovely. All right, take it away.
Okay. So I'm going to start where she's helping a couple whose daughter has died. That's the start of the scene.
Mm.
As Mr. Cuttingmaster stumbled after the carriage, an Anglo-Indian police officer stepped in, pushing her aside. Perveen rushed forward and caught her just in time. You again! The officer was grimacing at Perveen. Now she recognized his tone. He was the sergeant who kept her from looking for Dinesh Apte. Trying to steady her breath, she said, Yes, there's been a death, and I'm ensuring the family's right to identify the deceased. Unhooking the lathi at his belt, he scowled at her. Too much weeping and wailing. The scene must be cleared, and you go too. No more inciting civil unrest. Just like the officious Englishman on the Woodburn campus, this was not someone she could argue with. If she were arrested, she couldn't help Franey's family. As Perveen backed up, she saw anger in Mr. Cuttingmaster's eyes. Let me assist you with getting home. She made the offer, not knowing where they lived or how she could help. No, we'll find our way. Mr. Cuttingmaster's voice was sober as he took his wife by the arm and gently led her away. Perveen wished she'd been brave enough to stand up to the officer, but she'd been in trouble with the authorities 3 times within the space of a few hours. Actually, if it was 5 times, if she counted Mr. Atherton and Grady. Her thoughts were so turbulent that she walked slightly off course, and the side street she believed was a shortcut to Charney Station ended. As she reversed course, she noticed 3 men outside a fancy shop. One man with a Congress Party cap was yanking hard at the door, and 2 others were wielding lathis. Before she could call out, she heard glass shatter. Shards flew, sparkling like diamonds. As she drew closer, she read the golden letters painted on the building. The Hawthorne Shop, a fine haberdashery, established 1905. She'd never been inside, but she knew the name. This was the place where Frenny's father worked. The sorrow and fear she felt before was turning to anger. Perhaps in the vandals' minds, they were part of Gandhiji's movement, but orders to destroy were inconsistent with his beliefs. That afternoon, she'd been unable to speak up to the British, but she wouldn't be afraid to raise her voice to fellow Indians. Drawing in her diaphragm, she yelled, Stop that right now! That's the business place of hard-working people, Indians just like us. One of the men turned, stepping back. He looked ashamed, but the younger fellow beside him, who had a stocky build, righted the cap on his head and looked defiantly at her. Then a third man hefted his lathi in Perveen's direction. They knew they'd been caught, so they should have run off. Only they didn't run. Perveen felt her heart pounding as the 3 young men deserted the haberdashery and rushed along the street toward her with weapons in hand. She tried to step back. Her sandal's heel caught on the hem of her sari, and she stumbled. In an instant, she was surrounded. The threesome smelled of smoke and sweat, and 2 of them were grinning. She counted silently to 3, mustering her courage. My brothers, did you hear that Gandhiji's orders are to be peaceful in all that we do? The largest man spat at her. I'm no brother to you. The true patriots resist colonization. This is a British shop. You Parsis love the British, his compatriots spat. Are you going home to have cake and tea? I'm speaking to you as an Indian first and a Parsi second. Many of us fight for freedom. Remember Dadabhai Nauroji and Madame Bikaji Kama. Perveen hoped the names of famous Parsis in the movement might lead to a more reasonable discussion, but the leader of the pack advanced so he was inches from her face and looked down with a sneer. If you were a patriot, you would have gone to the bonfire. But aren't you a pretty lady? Let's see where your sari comes from. The man reached out and flicked the length of sari fabric from her head. Then he called her the curse word for a woman's private part. But that profanity paled next to the fact that he touched her sari. Stepping back, she said, "Good men don't harass women. And my sari was woven by women in Gujarat. It's Indian made, just like khadi cloth." He was so close she could smell his breath, hot and reeking of toddy. "You can afford anything you like. What's in that briefcase you carry? Your husband's money?" She'd known they meant harm from the time they looked at her. There was little inside of value, but the briefcase meant everything to her. It was the symbol of her education, her work, her status as something more than a daughter from a good family. "Leave me alone," she pleaded, and she saw reluctance in the eyes of the youngest. But the other two moved forward and batted away her hands to start pulling the front of her sari out of its secured place in her waistband. She screamed, finally understanding that their intention was to unclothe her. As terror settled in, she was violently pushed to one side. Her palms smarted as she struggled to keep hold of her briefcase. The push had come from a man, a Parsi man, a group of them wearing formal white suits, but shouting curse words as they battled the assailants. "Go," one of them called to her. Clutching her sari around her upper body again, Perveen sped away. The footsteps she expected to follow didn't. The men behind her were all embroiled in the battle. Perveen ran, trying to hold up the lower section of her sari to clear her sandals and clutching her briefcase across her front. Her breath felt like it was being torn from her chest. Not until she'd rounded the corner to safety did she slow down. There were tears at the edge of her eyes. She was crying for herself and for Bombay. Charney Station was closed. A constable in a line of wooden barriers told her this. The police were breaking up fights around the gate. She walked shakily, her eyes moving constantly. She tried to avoid groups of people who were arguing or close to blows. Some were fleeing, but she knew she hadn't the strength to run the mile and a half to Mystery House. Hope surged when she recognized Noaz Vadia, a solicitor in his 70s who lived in a neighboring building on Bruce Street. He was being assisted by a driver into a horse-drawn taxi. "Mr. Wadia," she cried out, hurrying toward him. "Miss Mystery, good to see you on this fine day. Where's your family?" he called out, smiling. "They're not here, and I'm trying to get to Bruce Street. Please, would you—" She stopped, realizing she was close to tears. "Come in the taxi with me." Mr. Wadia waved her up. "Hurry, the driver's saying there's trouble in some areas, and trouble can spread." "I'm so grateful." Perveen would have said more if she hadn't been so breathless. She settled in the carriage, doing her best to tuck her sari back together without allowing the gentleman to notice the disarray. Mr. Wadia was craning his head, looking out at the road. "It's still fine here. But look at the police. They're swarming like ants. Good thing they're so plentiful."
Oh, wow, that was quite a scary scene, and so quite interesting. Looking forward to reading that book. But okay, so let's move on to our questions and answer session, Sujata. So as can be seen from that excerpt you read for us, your books feature compelling and resourceful female characters, the two most well-known being Japanese-American antiques dealer and amateur investigator Rei Shimura from the Rei Shimura Mystery series, and as we heard from just now, pioneering Indian female lawyer PERVEEN Mystery from the PERVEEN Mystery Historical Mystery series. Who or what are your inspirations for your female characters?
Oh gosh. They're not exactly people I know, but maybe people I wish I were. And in the first situation, when I started writing mystery and I was a pretty young writer, I was interested in exploring what it meant to have ties to two places.
Mm,
For example, to be American and to be Asian. And
true.
I was able to do that with that character who goes to her father's home country, um, and begins work and tries to have the career of her dreams, but can't because she has a language barrier. And,
Mm.
when I think about it, my second character, Perveen Mystery, also has a barrier. Now, Perveen is born in India in 1898, and this excerpt that I read, I should have told you it was 1921 because
Wow.
I was talking all about these carriages and things like that. So it's the old days, and she's fortunate enough to have been born into an educated progressive family that they sent her to college, and actually her father wanted her to be a lawyer and work with him. Um, but she's disadvantaged because she's the only woman lawyer in Bombay at that time. And the reason I even came up with a character like that is I learned that there really were a few early women lawyers in India. One, Cornelia Sarabji, began working in the 1890s, and she practiced law through the 1930s, and she actually wrote 12 books. So she did a lot of advocacy, similar to like what you are doing in the Pixel Project.
Mm.
And it really was on the behalf of women. So she was there, and then there was another Indian woman lawyer who became a solicitor, and she practiced in the 1920s. And both of these women were ethnically Parsis. You heard me mention that
Mm.
the men who were attacking Perveen were kind of faulting her for being a Parsi, and her lineage, that her ancestors came from Persia, maybe
Mm.
1,000 years before. They've been in India almost 1,000 years, and they still were recognizable as Parsi, even though they spoke Gujarati, but they were very successful in business with the British, that they
Mm.
were favored. They sort of had a more favored status. So they became wealthier than a lot of people. And so there was
Mm.
resentment. And there were plenty of Parsis that did support the British. So this was a real turning point, these riots that happened in 1921, when actually the followers of the Gandhiji's movement for independence, which had its roots in peace, that they had not studied, or they had just learned and joined the movement, and that
Mm.
they fell into anti discrimination. They used
Mm.
discrimination that day.
Yeah. And yeah, speaking of, well, there are stereotypes always abound, right? And which is kind of like what you're showing here too, because even though the Parsis had been in India for such a long time, even at that point, people still think of them in a certain way, right?
Mhm.
And I mean, and this leads in nicely to the next question, although it's in a bit of a different direction. So the mystery and crime genre has its share of female stereotypes and tropes. And in addition, the genre does not have many Asian female detectives, private investigators, or amateur sleuths. So, when it comes to Asian female protagonists such as Ray and Pervin, it's not a stretch to deduce that the risk of stereotyping is doubled when gender and race intersect. How do you break stereotypes when creating your female characters like Ray's aunt Nori Shimura, who's one of my favorites, and
Mhm.
Pervin, who all have their own agency when dealing with the world around them, including situations that involve sexism, misogyny, and violence against women and girls?
Wow, that's a powerful question. So, I think about, how I would face a situation and how I would like to be,
Mm.
and the things that I care about, the social justice issues I care about, and I certainly see a lot of women fighting, and we're seeing it right now in Ukraine, right? We're seeing all
Mm.
kinds of women making weapons. We are seeing, the unthinkable happen.
Yeah.
So, I can absolutely see that if you're in a situation, I'm going to talk about Praveen, that there's so few women in professional settings, and there's so many people trying to shut you out. that makes you work all the harder. And at the same time, you know that if because it's a historical time period, the women aren't going to start shouting at their fathers, right?
Mm,
That's not the way in an Asian family setting that's going to happen. It's like you're
mm,
going to convince your father and mother that this is a good idea, or you're just maybe not going to share every detail of what's going on, but you're not going to go directly against. So she's got this family to work with that I write about that a lot because she lives at home with her family.
mm,
And then the other thing is because she's this educated woman from, an upper class background, a lot of people think she has no problems. She has a really big
mm,
problem that people, if they read the first book, The Widows of Malabar Hill, will find that she had a relationship,
mm,
and she couldn't get out of it legally, because the
mm,
laws around marriage and divorce were different for every religious community in India. I mean, where there were just separate codes for, say, Hindus and Sikhs had one code, and
mm,
Christians had another one, and then Parsis had one, and Muslims had another one. So, based on that, that determined whether you were going to inherit property, whether you could divorce, what age your parents could marry you. It was never a thing like, oh, you have to choose the partner you want. It was always assumed that the parent could have the choice, but it was just
yes.
the ages were different. So I deal with all of that. So it's just like so many things going on, and
Mm,
so I think it's easy to show victory because the victories are very small things, but they're very
mm.
big in the lives of Perveen and her female clients.
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely not easy when you have to you have to stick to the norms of the time period that you're writing in as well. I mean, as you said, you can't suddenly be all shouty because that's not what happened. That's not what happened in that time. Or actually, even now for that matter. Yeah. Oh, speaking of dads, I believe your dad is watching. So, hi, Mr. Banerjee.
Oh, that's wonderful. I didn't see that. Okay.
Yeah. So and well, yeah, your female characters, they're tough, multifaceted women with agency. However, in the case of Asian and other non-white female characters, readers may sometimes perceive them as unlikable or trying too hard, instead of lauding them as likable and determined as they would if these characters were male and white. So, do you ever feel pressured by gender and cultural expectations to make your female characters' independence and determination relatable and likable, particularly with negative stereotypes about submissive Asian women still very much alive?
Well, I guess I get a lot of questions from readers when I meet them whether this character is like a superwoman figment of imagination. Like, how would a woman really have been a lawyer or gone to college? Would
Mm,
parents let them do that? Because I think one of the biggest stereotypes out there now is that if you are an Asian woman, your parents want you to have an arranged marriage. Even
mm.
today, even in the United States, for like an Indian American girl,
Mm,
someone might say that, teacher might say that to her. Um,
mm,
so those are the kinds of stereotypes that are really grating, that it's sort of that we don't understand that Asian parents actually have these expectations for their daughters that are like the ones for the sons. Like, now the daughters have to be doctors and perfect moms, right? And
yes, yes.
everything else. So it just, and I remember seeing that very vividly when I was, um, in my 20s. I had a wonderful trip to India with my father, and I met so many women who were mathematicians and scientists. And I
Mm.
thought, I've never met so many women in these really serious, hard fields before. And they were cooking up these amazing meals in the evening. They were they were doing it all.
Oh my God, I'm feeling pressure now.
Be yourself.
Mm. Yeah, that's true. We have a question from the audience, so let's take it now. So, James Ziskin, I hope I pronounced that right.
Yours.
Sujata, you portray the drama of the Prince of Wales' visit so well. You show how the unrest grew dangerously in a short, exciting period of time. How did you go about your research?
Oh, well, first of all, it's so nice that James came into the conversation with us because he has a book coming out that's set in India too, another writer.
Mm,
Um,
mm,
okay, so about the Prince of Wales visit, I was really lucky that the British government had somebody writing an elaborate account of what happened every single day. And
mm,
some of the days they discussed like what suit he wore. They discussed all the people he met. And so I was able to get those records. Those records are now online. And I also learned how to research articles from that time period. And the fact that there were so many reporters from around the world that came, they came just the way reporters would come for a royal wedding. They came for this visit of the Prince of Wales, Edward VIII, when he was a young man to
mm,
India. And they were from all over. There was even a correspondent for the Baltimore Sun. They were from California. They were from Australia. And there was a difference in the way they reported the violence.
mm,
There were some
mm,
papers that just really played it down and said nothing's going on. Then there were other papers that said, "Oh yeah, like an American man got killed last night," um, and then so I really appreciated that. It made me want to put a journalist in the story because I realized how many of them were around and what a special time that was. And then finally, I connected with several historians in India, one of whom had actually interviewed a lady who was alive during that. It's like when you are
mm,
dealing with events that happened in the 1920s, most people are dead who were there. But
mm,
I
mm.
think he interviewed her some years ago. So there was quite a lot in this article. So those are the main sources that I used.
Oh, wow. Well, it's lucky that there are so many sources available, huh?
Yeah, well, it's people helping each other. And
Hmm.
it's really incredible that they are kind enough to help like that.
Oh, yeah, indeed. Okay, so let's talk about your male characters. So there are a wide variety of male characters in your books, ranging from the sexist and the misogynistic to those who respect women as their equals. Do you think reframing how stories describe men away from hostile and toxic stereotypes and towards complexity and even vulnerability can be one of the ways mystery and crime writers can break away from harmful tropes that promote toxic masculinity and the dehumanization of women in the genre?
Yeah, and I
Mm,
think that I've really settled into feeling that way with this series. Um,
mm,
Probably the most important man in the Perveen mystery books, that the most important man is her father, Jamshedji Mystery,
mm,
um,
mm,
because he really, really wants her to succeed as a lawyer. And he still has that um, business of being her father and having all kinds of clients, some of who are quite conservative and
mm,
not coming out. He doesn't want her to embarrass the firm. He
mhm,
wants her to succeed, and he also believes in freedom, but he doesn't like, the kind of these riots are really changing things. A lot of Parsis that were for freedom before and had given money, when suddenly they were seeing attacks against, their businesses, they're like, okay, this is over. I'm not for freedom. I don't want to be in independent India. I'd rather stay with the British. So it was a
mm,
big, really upsetting time.
mm.
So he's a very complex character, and I love to write about him and their relationship. have a lot of fun
Mm,
with that. And if you think back on it, in the Rei Shimura books,
mm.
the young Japanese American character, she had Mr. Ishida, who was this antique stealer who was her mentor.
Yes,
So
yes,
there are
yes.
these mentors that are great. And then
Mm,
you will see there's a British male character in um, the Bombay Prince that is
mm,
introduced as Satapur Moonstone. And
mm,
he's undeniably attractive, but
mm,
because he's a British person and she's a Parsi, it's just, and there are other complications that make it, a no-fly zone for her.
mm.
But one of the things that is interesting about Colin is handicapped. Um,
Yes, I remember. Yeah.
yes,
Mm,
so like that's actually is like
mm,
he's intentionally handicapped.
mm,
And because that, I feel like that that's an interesting thing, that like there are things that she can. There are quite a few things that she can do better than Colin. And
mm,
he has this wound. I mean, he literally has a wound. He lost his foot because he actually tried to save the life of a child, which is
mm,
nice. But he has this handicap, so he's not the same kind of guy as the other guys. So
mm,
that his outlook on the world, and he just doesn't go through as proudly as most of
mm,
the other British people did. He's a little bit more vulnerable.
mm. Yeah, that's definitely something quite interesting. I'm looking forward to see how their relationship develops. Yeah. So, okay, so books and stories in the mystery crime genre usually involve some kind of violence, including violence against women. In your books, although the violence, such as murders and riots, they tend to take place mostly off the page, but there are scenes, as the one you just narrated earlier, and also, like, there was one of Pervin being assaulted by her drunk partner in The Widows of Malabar Hill, and, Ray getting hit, albeit unintentionally, by her then boyfriend in Zen Attitude.
Mm.
So, how do you find a balance between showing violence as an integral part of the story, but not showing it gratuitously?
Yeah, well, the thing about it is I really hate to write it. So it's kind
Oh,
of funny that I'm in the mystery business. I really I don't like getting scared. I really don't. I love mysteries, but I don't like getting scared. So those scenes in general I don't get pleasure out of writing it. And I remember when I was at the start of my career in the 1990s, there was a period in the mid 90s when books were so exquisitely violent. There was so much victimization of women and children in books. I remember like walking out of a reading at a convention because I just couldn't believe, I just didn't want to have this stuff coming at me. And I think about readers
mm,
the same way too. That we read these stories, I think, because you know, for a number of reasons we read them.
mhm,
For some people, it's just like they like the setting. They want to read a book set in India, or they like that mysteries have this pace that they keep on going. But the person who reads my book is I think, is more interested in the social milieu, and what's real, what's not real, how is Praveen going to triumph? And she, the scenes, there's some scenes where she has these close calls, and I
mm,
really think hard about it because sometimes she can get out of a close call herself. But a lot of
mm,
times, the reason that we're saved, and realistically, is because someone else has come into the picture. So I
mm,
try to have a balance between, like, it might be a woman who comes
mhm,
in, it might be a guy, but he may have limited capability. He may have more capability than you think.
mm,
So it varies all the time. I would never have it just be that she's rescued by the guy all the time. And I honestly think that that would be, a no-go in the genre, because,
mhm,
the mysteries featuring female characters are really, really popular. And yes, a lot of these female characters have love interests, but the reader doesn't want to see them like get into trouble and just get rescued by guys. I mean, nobody wants
yeah,
to see that.
yeah. Definitely. Yeah, and well, I suppose this next question kind of like you can let you expand upon that. And it's how do you think mystery crime authors can tackle the issue of violence against women without falling back on harmful stereotypes and tropes?
Well, I think it's important that we think about how women are often targeted in situations of, like communal violence, like religious violence or national violence, that the war plays out on the bodies of women.
Mm,
This has definitely happened in India. It's happened in World War II. There's so many times that it's happened, and I think I want to, give witness to that this is what happens. And so that scene that I read to you was
mm,
that they were pulling off her sorry. And like that in
mm,
itself is enough. Like maybe the
mm,
reader was thinking, oh, it's going to be something more, but like that was considered an act. Like that was an act of violence
mm,
during these riots, was that people would just like they would attack people based on what they were wearing. And like a way to shame a woman, it would be to like pull off her sari, and she'd have her blouse and petticoat, but she would be not covered. So I wanted to share that. And because I thought, with this riot going on, I could have had Praveen just watching it from the side, but I wanted to have her have some stake of understanding how
yep,
traumatic it was by having a small trauma that.
mm,
And when I say small, I mean, as she escaped sexual assault.
mm,
Uh, but just to really understand how do we play out violence like that. But I would not go into a detailed description or anything. I don't want to put myself in the gaze of someone who's attacking or hurting somebody. And I
yeah,
think that unfortunately that can happen if
mm,
people are very detailed in their descriptions. It's one thing to talk about because you're trying to say like this is so terrible what's going on, but you have to really think about, the writer really needs to examine their motives for doing that scene.
mm. Okay, for my next question, I suspect your answer is yes for the first part, but perhaps you can expand on the second part of the question. So, the question is, in your opinion, can mystery crime stories be used to address the issue of sexism, misogyny, and violence against women? And if so, how?
Yes, there are so many ways that you can do that. I mean, you can talk about because my character is a lawyer, so any book can start with a problem. Like this book started, the Bombay Prince started with the problem that a young female student came to her and said, "Look, I'm on scholarship at this college. I love going here, and my parents paid so much money, and I don't wanna go when the prince is, having a parade. I don't wanna stand for him. I wanna stay
Mm,
away, like, Mahatma Gandhi wants us not to go to school, but to
yep.
stay away.
Mm,
Can I do that?" So, that those are the kinds of things you can do. You can do all kinds of mysteries about something's going wrong. My first mystery with Perveen was about three widows that were in danger of losing their inheritance after their husband died. It was a household where one man was married to three women, which was allowed at the time if you're a Muslim.
mm,
And so I'm showing you what the sexism of the time is, which was that they could only get this tiny, tiny share, and that there was a male household agent who was in charge of them, who said, "I want you to give this money to a charity, and I promise we'll take care of you." And
mm,
so, and Perveen knew that wasn't a good idea. She knew that she smelled a rat. So what I can do is I can show, even though the laws were stacked against the women, they could put their heads together. They could think about how to achieve justice for themselves without being able to change the law. And that's what I pretty much do in every book that I write, is that I find a way to have justice in this really difficult situation where there's this colonial legal system, and then there's the
mm,
patriarchy of everybody's own community, and yet
mm,
there is a way to get, at least a realistic way to get
mm.
something of what you want.
Mm, yeah, and okay, so for a slightly different take on it, so as you may know, in 2018, the Staunch Prize, which is it's an award set up to recognize crime and thriller novels without violence against women, was launched, and it faced criticism from major crime novelists like Val McDermid, who believes that as long as there is violence against women in the world, it should be reflected in fiction. So, what is your take on the idea that mystery crime thriller books can work without some form of violence against women? Do you think it's feasible given some of the long standing genre conventions and tropes?
Oh yeah, of course it is, and it's possible to have a mystery novel without a murder.
Mm.
You can't
What's
do
the
it every
mystery?
time, because then people will say, "Oh, this is, everything's fine."
Mm.
But you can do a mystery about a missing person.
Ah,
You can
mm,
do a mystery about something looks wrong, and, oh, maybe that person that died of a natural cause before didn't die of a natural cause. Or,
mm,
you can kind of, so there isn't as much pain. But, I think there's a function for mysteries. I think
mm,
that the biggest fear that a lot of us have is for the death of a loved one. And
mm,
when you read mysteries, you rehearse it, because you go through this thing where you learn all about death in a mystery. You see all these people grieving. If it's a violent death, you understand about the police process, and there's, justices served most of the time at the end of a mystery. So I think that's part of the reason that we read mysteries, is because it's something where we're afraid of death, and that this
mm,
is the way that we can sort of just prepare ourselves. And we get people read mysteries for decades, right? And
mm.
if we're
Yeah,
lucky that we don't lose our loved ones for a long time.
amen. But okay, this actually leads in nicely to the next bunch of questions, which are about stories. But before that, let me just show you a comment from James Ziskin again. Wonderful scene with Colin in the little park opposite the Asia Society. So well written.
uh, that's my little love scene. So
Aw,
there's a
cute.
love scene. You've got to get this bundle, because that way you can understand the whole emerging love story, and it's going to
Mm,
be in the first edition.
yes, so please hop over and donate to get this extremely special bundle that Sujata has kindly donated to us. Mm. Okay, so to talk about stories. Now, stories can be one of the most powerful ways of bringing about social change because they can help change cultural narratives and perspectives about social issues and traditions. In your opinion, how can authors strike a balance in their storytelling between raising awareness about human rights issues, such as violence against women, while telling an engaging story without being pedantic or preachy?
Yes. Yes, that's the challenge, is that you don't want to be too obvious. So the first thing I would say is think about the time period, and
Mm,
that people couldn't say, oh, it's, yeah, oh, of course, like we're for gay rights. You couldn't
mm,
say that in,
yeah.
1921.
Mm,
But you could say, I'm sorry you're having a hard time, and you lost, your connection with that special person, and I promise I won't tell anyone. That's the kind of
mm,
way that Perveen could support her friend Alice Hobson Jones, who is gay. But
yes.
it's just like a very, very subtle. So you have to think about the time, and
Yes.
try, I try not to have, like, a speech come from my person's lips. The book that I'm working on for the fourth book, is a mystery about reproductive rights. Um,
Ah.
so it's about birth control, it's about abortion, it's about whether people have a right to be to sleep together but not have children. Like that's a really
Mm,
radical thought. And it's Perveen she doesn't even know all the parts of her body, right? So
mm,
very difficult for her to understand all these things. So I have her have a conversation with a woman doctor, one of the few women doctors of the time. And the doctor talks about what she's seen in the lives of the women who've had to have so many children, child after child after child. And, eventually, that some of them die quite young from
yeah.
problems, complications. And so that's how she builds her thoughts,
Mm,
because she sees something literally happen rather than coming and saying, I believe this about women.
yes. A much more powerful way of telling the issue. I would think. But and actually, I think you kind of covered this from Barb Krause, who says, "Tell about Pervin's English woman friend."
Yeah.
So yeah, so
So
Barb, I hope that answered. Yeah.
Perveen has a friend called Alice Hobson Jones, and she met Alice at Oxford.
Mm,
And Alice, that they were friends. They lived in the same hall. And
mm,
Alice was a math major, and Perveen was studying law.
mm,
And the Alice's family is high up in the British political system in the city. They wind up being together in India again, and so the whole relationship is renegotiated, and they had a lot of freedom in Britain. They could march with the suffragettes, and they traveled after the war. They traveled briefly to France, and during the war, they volunteered. Because Oxford was turned into like a military hospital. I don't go into all of this in the books, but this is sort of
mm,
the background. I had to understand the friendship between Perveen and Alice before I wrote the first book, because I
mm,
wanted her sidekick to be another woman. And I wanted, one thing I liked about Alice's potential is because Alice comes from a British family, she can be an informant on what's
mm.
going on. Because I'm writing a mystery series where nobody trusts the police because it's the colonial police. Um,
Right. Right.
so you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to call the police and they'll take care of everything." And so, but you want to know what the police are doing. And actually, in the Bombay Prince, they're really Perveen and her father are in the sights of the police. The police are thinking that they might be involved in something relating to the unrest,
Mm,
some circumstantial evidence.
mm,
So Alice is very helpful. Like she will just kind of let Perveen know who came by the house and things like
mm.
that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's great that you included a LGBTQ character, and but in this time period where it's actually quite difficult to write about it, because obviously you can't be all rah-rah about it as
Mhm.
you would in a modern day character.
Yeah, something interesting. My books are published in a number of countries, including India.
Hmm.
And when my first book came out in India or was being edited, it was still against the law to be gay.
Ah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and my Indian editor really, really wanted me to do a whole lot with Alice, because he saw it as a way for people to understand about being gay, and that it could
Hmm.
happen through reading this historical novel. And he just really wanted a lot about that, and I didn't, I did what was seemed like the right amount in that story.
Yes.
But I do plan to have a romantic situation for Alice in the book that I'm writing right now.
Ooh.
So it's a little bit further. People have to keep reading, but it's not like Alice is always going to be on the wing woman, I should say.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, and just another plug, you can get your hands on an advanced reading copy of this book if you donate
Right.
to the the Pixel Project.
Yeah, that's right. The reproductive rights one. Yeah,
Mm.
Alice is in that book. the
Oh.
romances, book 5. It's like it's funny when you talk to an author, you see the books in front of you that they have, then
Mm-hmm.
there's the one that they wrote that's about to come out, and they're tempting
Mm.
you about that, but they're actually writing yet another book. So it's a little bit crazy.
Yeah, you have to like juggle so many things, right? Yeah, and actually, this ties in perfectly with the next question. So, do you think it's important for influential authors such as yourself, who are read all over the world, to make a conscious effort to include characters in your stories that show readers the importance of respecting women as equals and as human beings?
Oh, of course. Yeah. And
Mm.
you're really kind to say I'm influential
Oh,
because
20
I don't
countries is
think of myself
influential.
that way. But I'm really glad to be in a number of countries.
Mm,
And one of the things that I really enjoy about my books is that I'm showing in India at a time that there was just a lot more easy flow of people with different religions.
mm,
And I'm demonstrating it, and I'm humanizing people. And it's not like that in the movies, right? The Indian movies these days. It's hard to find films like that tell those kinds of stories that just show that easy relationship. And though people, of course, they kept to their own religion and they didn't marry across. That was a
mm,
really big deal to marry across religion. But they worked together more, and it just what there just wasn't this nastiness. And and I'm saying the nastiness, it's all over the world, in different ways in different countries, political parties, ethnic
mm,
groups. So a mystery author has a lot of leeway because you create a cast of characters. You can say, I want
mm,
to have that, that good person be, they can be this faith, and I'm never going to always have the villain be a certain faith, or a man, for example, or and then there just are a lot of things you can do, a lot of very gentle ways that you can highlight just the wonderful diversity of people in our world.
definitely. And with that, we have come to the last two questions of our session. I mean, time has just flown. So you have been so very incredibly supportive of our Read for Pixels campaign and our anti-violence against women work as a whole. So this may be a bit of an obvious question, but why do you support the cause to end violence against women?
Oh gosh, well, the thing is, it's everywhere. It is
Mm.
everywhere. And the thing, there's a lot of shame about it. That's the
Ah.
thing, and so it's a way, the more that women know, and the more that they know that there are hands out there to help, the more their lives could change. But it's a very complicated situation. Like, apparently, the most dangerous time for a woman sometimes is, when she does make that initial standing up. In my
Yeah.
first Perveen book, The Widows of Malabar Hill, Perveen experiences abuse, and something happens in her. Like, things have been bad emotionally for a while. That's probably a very
Mm.
common experience before there is actual violence. And in my book, Praveen takes action pretty quickly. And
Mm.
that's harder for women who have children, for women who
Yes.
don't have, a bunch of jewelry that they can grab out of their bureau and leave, and,
Mm.
that's their income, that they don't have a bank account of their own. So it's such a complicated thing. And I often think that when I go around the world and just my daily life, when I see people that are, kind of surly and unpleasant, I think there may be something very, very major going on, in their lives. And
Yeah.
it might be this kind of violence, and that I'm not helping them because I don't know about it. I don't know how good I would be at it. So I'm really appreciative to the Pixel Project for, this long time consistent stance for helping women.
Oh, thank you. But I mean, as an author specifically, what do you think that, you and your colleagues can do to help with the cultural change needed to eradicate violence against women and girls?
Mm. Well, I think that writing the kind of books that we do is good, and then showing empowerment, showing women getting out of these situations.
Mm,
Um, but also, in real life, say connecting with younger people, I think is a good start. I think
mm,
that the age that women are in their teens when they first start to be seen as women, and it could actually, I should say, it could start at 11, it could start at 10. They're
mm,
so vulnerable. And I
right.
think that, if we can do things, if we can do writing workshops with these girls, if we can mentor the girls that, to get them through that difficult period and start to think about themselves as more than a collection of body parts, I think that could be really, that could potentially be good.
Oh, okay. That's really great. So, mentoring people. So, hi everyone. This is the voice who was asking all the questions. So, thank you, Sujata, for that excellent session,
Oh,
and
thank you,
for all
Sharon.
yeah, and for all you guys out there, just in case you missed the start of our session, we are excited to let you know that Sujata has not only generously spent her time here answering all our questions, but has also donated a couple of super exclusive goodies to the stash of other goodies we have up as perks for donors at the Read for Pixels Rally Up fundraising page, as we mentioned just now through the section. Now, goodie number one is the next PERVEEN Mystery ARC, signed and personalized. There is one signed and personalized copy of the advanced reading copy of the next PERVEEN Mystery book up for grabs for one donor anywhere in the world. If you're a fan of this series, then this is absolutely your chance for some serious bragging rights by getting your hands on this book and reading the story before anyone else does. And with the additional benefit of knowing that you have done something to help support the cause to end violence against women. Do note though that you will have to wait several months after you donate to get this goodie, as we mentioned that the book is currently being edited and has in fact yet to be officially announced. And as of now, the ARC is slated to be ready by the end of this year, but the exact mailing date cannot be guaranteed. But we will do our best to get it into your hands as soon as it's ready to go. Now, goodie number two is Sujata Massey's PERVEEN Mystery Book and Character Note Bundle. This very special bundle is only available to one generous Read for Pixels donor situated in the US or Canada, and the donor will get one signed and personalized first edition hardcover of The Widows of Malabar Hill. I believe you have a sample with you, Sujata, that you can
Oh yeah,
show.
I could show the books.
Yeah, as I read them out. So yeah. So Widows of Malabar Hill and one signed and personalized first edition hardcover of The Satapur Moonstone, one signed and personalized first edition hardcover of The Bombay Prince, and one handwritten note from either PERVEEN Mystery or another character from the series of the donor's choice. All three books have either won or are in the running for major crime mystery awards. And The Widows of Malabar Hill, in particular, has won 4 awards and is a rare first edition copy. And in fact, this is the first time Sujata is giving away a complete signed and personalized hardcover set of all three books. Now, there are also plenty more goodies available from authors like Anne Bishop, Elia Don Johnson, Angela Yuriko Smith, Juliet Marillier, apologize for that, Lauren Willick, Linda D. Addison, Eloisa James, Meg Gardiner, and more. And new goodies will be released every week throughout this month. Now, let me share a slide with you. Oops, there we go. So you can to get your hands on these goodies, head on over to RallyUp at tinyurl.com/r4p rallyup IWD 2022 to donate. Please be careful, it's case sensitive, yeah? And if you want to learn more about Read for Pixels and our upcoming author sessions, you can go to bit.ly/read for pixels. As of now, we have raised $1,487 towards our $5,000 goal. So please do give generously before the fundraiser ends on April 15. All funds go towards the Pixel Project's work to help end violence against women. Now, the Pixel Project has also produced its first charity anthology titled Giving the Devil His Due. And let me see if I can get that up for you. There we go. So this our anthology is kind of like the Twilight Zone meets Promising Young Women. It is available for order from major booksellers worldwide, including Amazon, Kobo, Google Play, Book Depository, and more. And as a bonus for early bird buyers, we have teamed up with 12 of the 16 authors to offer an exclusive limited edition anthology bookplate. Each author will sign 16 bookplates and they will be given out on a first come, first served basis. Each bookplate also includes a resource for domestic violence and sexual assault victims and survivors in 205 countries. For more information about the anthology and how to score a bookplate, you can visit bit.ly/giving the devil his due. And mind the caps, please. All net proceeds from the sale of this anthology go towards keeping the Pixel Project's campaigns, programs, and initiatives, such as this one, alive and kicking. And to find out more about violence against women and what you can do about it, visit the Pixel Project's website at www.thepixelproject.net. Now, I believe, Sujata, that you have a couple of announcements for us.
Oh, yeah. So I was very happy. I just learned that the Bombay Prince, the book I read to you from, is in the running for two big mystery awards. One is called the Agatha Award, and one is the Bruce M. Alexander Lefty Award. And so both of what happens, there are five finalists, and one of the finalists, and for each of the awards, fans vote for it at a conference. So unless you're going, that you're all off the hook, because unless you're going to the conference, probably James is going to the conference. And so I'm really happy about that. And the conferences, if anybody happens to want to go to mystery conferences in the United States, these are really interesting gatherings with writers, and they're not just from the US. Mystery authors, and you can go to panels and they talk about mysteries. And there's one in early April called Left Coast Crime. It's happening in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'll be there. I'll be at one called Malice Domestic, which is happening in Bethesda, Maryland in late April. And then in early September, there's one called BoucherCon, which is going to be really large. And that will be in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Mm. Yeah, so if you guys are in the area or if they have an online option, do hop in and help Sujata out by voting for her book. Yeah, so we've come to the end of our session today. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. And I wish you a good day or good night wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, thanks for coming, everyone.
Okay, bye.